Hola, guys and gals. Welcome to Tuesday. Yesterday we talked about point slope form, which I hope you guys thought was pretty easy. It's not too bad. Today we're going to talk about standard form. So standard form is just, yet again, another way to write these equations out. This one's a little bit more helpful than point slope form. We're going to talk a little bit about X and Y-Intercepts because they have a lot to do with standard form. So let's talk about this. So standard form looks like this. Basically, standard form, you'll see this often as AX plus BY equals C. That's like the fancy way that people will say that. Here's what I get that's important there. X and Y are on the same side of the equation, and the constant is by itself on the other side. Okay, that's like the main criteria of standard form. All right, there's a couple other things that are important, which we'll talk about here in a second. But let's say we had 5x plus 6y equals 30, for example. That is standard form because the x and the y are on the same side and the constant's by itself. Now, the two other things that have to be true for this to be in standard form is you can't have fractions in standard form, which some of you probably like that a lot. So if something had a fraction, so let's say, let's use a different one. Let's say we had 1/3 x minus 7 equals 5. Okay? If you want to get that actually in standard form, you're going to have to get rid of the fraction. And the best way to get rid of a fraction is just multiply the whole thing by something. So in this case, 3 would work really well, right? So if I multiply everything in this equation by 3, 1/3 times 3 is just 1x, 3 times 7 is 21, and 3 times 5 is 15. You can 100% do that and fix the equation. If it had a fraction, you need to get rid of it. You can just multiply it all by something. Usually the greatest common factor of all the denominators is a really, really, really good choice. So you can't have fractions for A, B, or C. You want them all to be integers. The other thing is you want the x, the coefficient of x that's going to go first has to be positive. It's always going to be a positive number. So again, let's say you had negative 11x plus 9y equals negative 403. If your first coefficient here in your first term is negative, what we can do to fix that is just divide everything that you see by negative 1. And basically when we do that, all we're going to do is fix all the signs. We're going to change all the signs. So negative 11x divided by negative 1 is going to be positive 11x. 9y divided by negative 1 is going to be negative 9y. And negative 403 divided by negative 1 is positive 403. And we can also do that. So you can't have negatives in the first term. The x can't be a negative coefficient. And you can't have fractions. And then as long as x and y are on the same side, you're looking at standard form, my friend. So you're probably sitting there like, all right, Mr. Odie, I get standard form, x and y on the same side. How is that actually helpful to me? Well, it's not the most helpful. It doesn't tell you the slope. It doesn't tell you the y-intercept. It doesn't even tell you a point that's on your graph. So, not great. But what it is useful for is finding x and y-intercepts. So remember, when we talked about y-intercepts, we talked about y-intercepts where it crosses the y-axis, and x-intercepts where it crosses the x-axis. So if you think about those points, so I have this graph, right? And it's going to cross. I'm just going to draw a line. Looks something like this. Let's pretend like it's straight. All right. So I can see that I have an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Now, if you think about what these points are looking like, right? So this point right here, the x value of this point is 3. What's the y value, though? If it's right on the x-axis, the y value would be 0. So this point is the point 3, 0. What about this point down here? I see that it crosses at -4. Well, the x value there would be 0. So there's this cool thing that goes on when we're talking about intercepts. If we're looking for an x-intercept, the y value will always be 0. And if we're looking for a y-intercept, the x value will always be 0. So why are you bringing that up, Mr. Odie? Well, let me tell you. Standard form is really good for finding x and y intercepts. So let's say we had something like 6x minus 9y equals 27. Why not? All right. This is a really good one to find x and y intercepts. In fact, if they want you to graph something in standard form, typically they'll say use x and y intercepts, and I'll show you guys that. So let's do, usually I just gotta do this. X-intercept, y-intercept, go from there. So if I want to find an x-intercept, I know the y value is 0. So I'm just going to plug in 0 where I see y. And if I want a y-intercept, I know the x value is 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 where I see x. And now you're going to see this really cool thing that happens, right? Because -9 times 0 is just 0. And 6x plus 0 is just 6x. So notice that because I plugged in 0 in standard form here, my middle term, the by, just kind of cancels out. And over here, when I plug in 6 times 0, that's just 0. And 0 minus 9y is just -9y equals 27. So the same thing happens on the y-intercept side. This is why it's actually really easy to find x and y intercepts in standard form. One of the terms is just going to cancel out when you plug 0 in, which is really cool, right? Yeah, I'll take that. So now, to find it, it's just really easy. Divide by 6. Let's see, 27 over 6. 3 goes into both of them. Right? Does 6 go into both of them? No. So 3 goes into 27 9 times. 3 goes into 6 2 times. So it looks like it's going to cross the x-axis at 9 halves. And I don't care if you want to write it like that, x equals 9 halves, or if you want to write the point 9 halves 0, that's fine too. Typically it doesn't matter, just make sure you read if there's specific instructions, right? And then over here, if we divide by -9, then we're going to get y equals -3, or again, the point 0, -3. So there's my x and my y intercepts using standard form. It's pretty easy. Not bad. So at least it's good for something. Again, I don't think it's as helpful as slope-intercept form, for sure. But I could rewrite it in slope-intercept form. Right? That's kind of like what we did in Unit 1 when we had to rearrange those equations. We could totally do that, but the best thing we can do is find x and y intercepts here. So I want to do one more of those, and let's talk about graphing. So if you want to graph using intercepts, basically what we're going to do, we're going to take one of those equations in standard form, we're going to find the x-intercept, find the y-intercept, we're going to plot those 2 points, and then just connect them. That's pretty easy, yeah? Yeah, not bad. So let's say we had something like 2x plus y equals 10. All right? Is it in standard form? Sure it is. Because all the coefficients are integers, there's no fractions, no negative in front of the x, and x and y are on the same side. Rock solid. So I want to find the x and the y-intercept. So when I find an x-intercept, y is 0. And if you want to, you can just start actually just canceling those things out right away. So that's going to be 2x equals 10. On the y-intercept, the x is 0. So that's just going to give me y equals 10. That one's already done for me. That's pretty nice, right? Yeah, pretty nice. Over here, we just got to divide by 2. And we find that x equals 5. So this is going to cross the x-axis at 5, the y-axis at 10. So here's what I'm talking about graphing. So I know that my y-intercept over here on the y-axis is the point 0, 10. The point where it crosses the x-axis is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right there. So once I find those 2 points, I can graph them on my graph, and then I can just connect those 2 points. And that is the line 2x plus y equals 10. Pretty easy, yeah? Hopefully you think so. So that if they ask you to graph using standard form, that just means find the x and the y-intercept. If you want to rewrite it in slope-intercept form, like I said, I don't really care, because that's definitely more helpful. But that's pretty much what we're talking about here. When we think standard form, we're talking about x and y-intercepts, stuff like that. Plugging in 0 for x, plugging in 0 for y. There's one more type of thing that I want to show you. And I saw these on the practice test. So you know what that means, right? You're probably going to see one. So let's say I gave you a line. And I'm just going to do this line. Ooh, that's definitely not straight. All right. Because everyone's going to pretend that's a good straight line, right? It looks a little better on video than it does on the old board here. Okay. So, this line is a horizontal line. All right. It'll say something like, which values would you need for A, B, and C to write the line, to write the equation of the line that's shown right here? So first off, we have to think through this a little bit. It's a horizontal line, so what's the slope of that line? Hopefully you know, because we talked about it last week. Slope of a flat line, that's the road you can drive on, is 0. You're rising 0, you're running whatever you want. Rise 0, run 7. Rise 0, run 7, right? So we talked about this last week. What's the equation of a horizontal line? Well, hopefully you remember. It's just y equals a number, and that number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because it crossed at 5. So how would I turn this into this? Well, if you look at this a value here, I want to get rid of x. So how would you get rid of x? If a was 0. Because 0 times x is 0, right? And then I want y just by itself. So what would I need for b? Well, what's really in front of y? Just the 1. And then what would I need for c? Well, we said it crosses at 5. So that would be the example of what the a value, the b value, and the c value are for the horizontal line, y equals 5. So I saw a couple of these. I saw ones that are vertical too. Remember, that's the line x equals a number. So that's good for you guys to think about too. And I kind of like that idea of having to think through what those coefficients or constants might have to be. All right. It's really just a lot of X and Y-intercepts. So I think you guys will be okay. Let me know if you have any questions coming closer to the test. I'll be online tomorrow for office hours if you guys are struggling with anything. See you later.